Well, thank you very much for being here today. And do we have the agenda up or? And this is a special meeting today since we have our first in-person meeting in, seems like 20 years. There's only been 2. And we have new faces, new folks that have joined in the EAC since then. But before starting with any business, I would just like to, first of all, introduce myself, even though we've met online at least a few times in the last year or so. I'm Francisco Gonzalez. I'm the co-chair of the EAC, and I'm also our council member representing District 12. And our other co-chair, the community co-chair, Leah Moses, she unfortunately won't be able to be with us today, but again, most of you have been seeing her during our virtual meetings. So before starting with the business of the meeting for today, we thought it would be a good idea to just do a quick round of introductions since we are already here in person. And I know we've done something like that before online, but it works so much better in person. So if you don't mind, we're just gonna ask you to say quickly your name, the district that you represent, and also just in a couple of sentences, why did you join the EAC, or what prompted you to join the EAC? And let me just start by myself. Again, Francisco Gonzalez, and I joined the EAC because the previous chair appointed me to the position. Not really, I requested this position because it really fits within my experience as working on diversity and equity issues for the last 20 plus years. So I thought it was a good fit with my experience and also with my work at the council. So let's do left-wise.
Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Brianne Rothstein, and I joined a at-large appointee, and I joined because I'm very passionate about regional issues, particularly planning, and I wanted to lend my voice and experience to the regional policy plan updates. And in my day job, I work for the city of Brooklyn Park, and we do a ton of work around equity and inclusion in that city. And so combined with my personal passion for equity as well as my professional experience, I thought I had something to offer this committee. So that's why I joined.
Oh, I'm Roberto, I'm her driver.
Hi, I'm Marianne Padua, and yeah, it's my favorite son. It's also my full-time IHS and PCA and home care. So yeah, I go where he goes and he goes where I go. So anyway, I joined EAC, and because I've been on disability officially in 2010, and I've been doing advocacy ever since then also. And you know, I've been through so many different community centers doing advocacy in those community centers, and yet finding staffs that were not really helpful and really doing a lot of things that are so negative towards the people with disabilities. And even though I would have ombudsmen to help and try to minimize things and help them, it's not doing well. And as I move from community to community and go to the community center on those areas, the same things are happening. And so I figured, well, what is the main thing that's going on those different areas? There's gotta be a main factor. And so this is why, I'd like to know how to nip it in the bud. In the bud, I should say. So anyway, this is why I wanted to join something or somewhere where things is being built first, instead of somewhere where where it's already done, and I have to write letters and letters, trying to undo things. Because once it's signed and sealed and delivered, well, that's impossible to undo. So I'm glad that I got here, because this is where we can do things, and we can rewrite things and be doing things that we can transform before it gets signed, kissed, and delivered. So I'm hoping I can help with some of those things. Because, come on, I'm gonna be, well, in July, 58 years old. I've had a lot of things that I've experienced throughout my years. As my son, he will vouch for that. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Jenkins, and I believe it's District G. I don't know. But I wanted to be a part of this because my personal life, my mom was disabled. So growing up, I had a disabled mom, and just watching her navigate through so much and just trying to get resources and help was just really hard. But then in my professional life, I work for the federal government, I work for the Social Security Administration, and so I see a lot of vulnerable population that come through just trying to get disability, trying to get approved, trying to get resources, facing homelessness, fighting addiction, and so forth. And so I just try and advocate for them and try and plug them with additional resources, particularly with them waiting to get approved. It's such a lengthy process for some people. And in the meantime, they need resources, they need housing, and so forth. And so I just wanted to be a part of this, even as Mary Ann was saying, at that level of, what can we do to help? So that's why I'm here, to learn and to grow.
Thank you.
My name is Isabella Red. I'm a member at large. I think for me, something shifted after Judge Floyd, because I think I worked at the state, I worked at the APP and everything. Sometimes we take the processes just the way they are. We knew there was a lot of inequity and a lot of injustices happening, but I think we just moved along because I guess someone, somewhere, or somehow had put it in place, and that's how we accepted it. But I think after Judge Floyd, something shifted in me, and I think I have been intentionally putting myself in spaces where I realize it's really important not to only put the face, but also the voice of the BIPOC community. And just also realizing that unfortunately, 2022, we still have heartbreaks that we just lost about 10 million people just because people don't feel like, unfortunately, we belong. So it seems like just as you think we are fighting and we're getting it somewhere, I think just that the heartbreaks to realize that this fight might overlive me, my children, my children's children. And then as an immigrant, just trying to figure out if my ancestors had it that hard, and then you come in with an accent, you're almost invisible. So I'm here just to make sure that my voice is heard.
I'm Lila Eltawely. I'm Enterprise Equity Senior Manager. I joined the Metropolitan Council back in September, as most of you know, and I joined because, or I intentionally decided to come to the council because I was very involved in, so civically, I was involved, I ran for office in 2018, I actually ran for state representative at the time. And through that experience and working on campaigns and helping other folks run, I had an opportunity to really connect with folks across the state, which led me to the understanding that it's very important to be involved in regional planning, not just to run for office. But that's what brought me here. So I'm here for the impact.
I'm Naomi Shakir. I am as well in the OEO office as equity consultant. Prior to this, I worked for the state more on mental health equity. And so my reason why is to really hone in and do equity across the board in the regional planning. I also was at the council prior in the HRA, so I have a little bit of history with the council and enjoyed my time while I was in the HRA and wanted to return back.
Good evening. My name is Anita Urbina Davis. I represent the northern part of Minneapolis and the inner ring suburbs, that area, North Minneapolis and northern suburbs. I wanted to become part of Metropolitan Council because as a Latina who's lived in Minneapolis my entire life, born, raised, and still live in North Minneapolis, I feel like all my life I've been fighting for equity and human rights and civil rights. It's just part of my everyday conversation. In fact, talking about disability, I have a friend and we were on the phone for about an hour talking about some of the issues he's dealing with his own and wanting to be split into 3 different people. As a black man, number 1, as a disabled man, number 2, and as a black man, number 3. And so he said, I'm all of one. Doesn't the department understand that? I'm one person, instead of splitting me up to 3. And so those are some of the things that I have been fighting for the last, I would say, 47 years. I grew up and still live in North Minneapolis when the riots occurred. People thought after George Floyd that was the first time Minneapolis ever experienced rioting, and that's not correct. We had riots that were the same as on Lake Street on Plymouth Avenue North in the 60s. And right now, finally, after all these years, 40-some years, we're finally getting Plymouth Avenue rebuilt again. Being a resident of North Minneapolis, like I said, I feel like I'm fighting constantly because we feel as North Minneapolis residents, we're not recognized, or we're put in the back, or we talk too much and so let's hear somebody else talk, or we're too loud, or we're too rowdy, or we're too discivil. So many reasons why we don't have the necessary things that we need just to live a basic life. And so, like I said, since I was 12 years old and the riots occurred, just to give you an idea, I'm 68, I became active in civil and human rights, and I call it civil and human rights because people will separate it. As this is your human right, this is your civil right. They are one thing, in my opinion. And so part of Metropolitan Council to me was just a natural place to be involved, to have a voice, not just for the Latino community that I'm part of, but for the North Minneapolis community that I still live and love. It's my home. And I want my home and my neighbors to have equity. And so every day is a struggle for that equity and to be recognized that we deserve that equity. And so, like I said, this is one of the reasons that I want to be part of this committee, this group of people.
And Anita, you're one of the older members of the, not by age, but
Yeah, that's okay.
On the EAC.
It puts me in another bracket of being an elder.
So she's got a wealth of experience as to the work of the EAC. She's seen a lot of stuff. So, thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Mary Bogie, I'm the council's regional administrator, and I'm going to save my introduction for when I present before you today.
Okay.
Oh, I'm George Gonzalez, and I'm the Deputy Regional Administrator.
Sarah I'm Anthea Jordan, the Director of the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity.
Hello, I'm Selena Martinez, Senior Manager for Equity and Inclusion at Metro Transit. Just as a guest here today. Nice to meet you all.
Hi, I'm Chantal. I work in the Office of Equity and Opportunity as well. I am Program Technical Specialist, Admin, Executive Assistant, Executive.
Hi everyone, I'm Kimberly Malone. I'm the Investigation Resolution Unit Manager in the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity at the Council.
Okay. I'm Phil Sterner, and I'm on Metropolitan Council. I represent District 15, which is Inver Grove Heights, Rosemont, Burnsville, and Egan. And I serve on the Transportation Committee and the Environment Committee, as well as on the liaison to the Clean Water Council. And I'm on the Investment Review Committee besides this one. So I kind of stepped forward on the committee because they were short a member, and I wanted to make sure we had the 4 council members covered all the different areas that we have for connectivity in that. And for me, it's always been one where I've been kind of connected with equity. Like my dad was in the military, so as a young kid, I lived in Germany from 4 years old to 2nd grade, and then I was like an exchange student to Brazil, and been to Guatemala 3 times and such. And I have a close friend of mine, and she's involved in the North Minneapolis Black community and such. So I always just am a good listener, and I keep my eyes open, and I've got opinions, but I feel I'm here to listen and adopt and make sure we have the right fit here at Metropolitan Council. So thanks for all your work today. Appreciate it and going forward.
Hi everyone, my name is Charlie. I'm the council member for District 13. That's the eastern half of St. Paul, and then the first ring suburb just south of it. So that's South St. Paul Park, Newport, Mendota Heights, and Lilydale. And in addition to the EAC, I'm on the management committee, the community development committee, and I'm the chair of audit. Equity is actually one of the reasons I applied to be a Met Council member, because in my day job I run a leadership program that trains Black and brown people to get on government boards commissions. And even when I worked in the mayor's office before that, I wore many hats, and one of those hats was working with the mayor to do the administrative ends of boards and commissions appointments for Mayor Chris Coleman. And so I feel like all my professional life I've been working in the area of equity and bringing diverse voices to the table. And so that's why I joined the council and signed up for the EAC.
All right, I started my last meeting in this room. We were a planning session here, and I started with, I'm back. Until I was reappointed now, but I was served on the Met Council in 1990, 91, something in there, so about 30 years ago. And that was on the diversity committee back then. Unfortunately, not a lot has changed, I gotta tell you, but some has changed. There's more information, more technology, and more people aware of what's impacting the communities. I started out as a social worker, working with convicted felons from 18 to 30. I even shared even prior to that, I spent a little bit more time in the county home school for boys than I would like to say. But I learned a lot about working with people and being in different situations. And so I started as a counselor and worked with youth for a number of years, worked with elders. Then I worked with a group, back then it was called Urban Coalition, and it was around people of color, but it was on policy, which was a really aha moment for me, because so much of what I did was one-to-one, or working with families, or working with individuals, or working on problems, but not the policies. And the group I was with really took time to look at, what was the impact of low-income housing. My area was juvenile justice, but it was around out-of-home placement of kids of color. They're more likely to be taken out of home, more likely to do more time, and that, unfortunately, again, that's not changed. But anyway, so I did that and for about 20-some years or something like that, and then I went to corporate. I used to head XL Energy's Foundation and Community Relations for a number of years. Then went over and used to head U.S. Bank's Foundation and Community Relations for a long time. Right now I'm president of the Latino Chamber of Commerce of Minnesota. I'm working as a consultant with a couple other nonprofits, working with Golden Gloves Boxing of America, and it's our 100-year anniversary coming up. And how I came to this point was, like Chaya here, I was encouraging people to sit on boards and committees, and so I'm looking at the Secretary of State's notice of all these positions, and I was always telling people, I don't care if you're a barber or, a plumber, there is a board for you in the state of Minnesota. And so I always sit on one public body all my life. I've encouraged others to do that, and I saw this District 6, and I literally had to look it up and say, do I live here? And it turns out I did, I do. And so I applied and was appointed. By the way, I kind of should have started out earlier and introduced Valentina? Yeah. Okay, just introduce Valentina Chaco, my assistant for the day. And again, I want to apologize for being late, but I was over at Shiloh listening to the comments regarding the Blue Line extension, and so my assistant was taking notes. But anyway, so that's what brings me here. I believe in equity, and I think I've done that some level or some way all my life, and sat through a number of boards like this and stuff. And one thing I do like is you meet a lot of good people. If they're all committed to the same thing, it's even if it's those variations on that theme, if you will. I think I've enjoyed that most about my work both back then at the Met Council and what I'm looking forward to do now.
Excellent, thank you. I think we've covered everyone here. Couple of housekeeping issues. There's plenty of food. Please feel free to repeat. Take as much as you can, and take some home too. And you have a package, or you should have a package with the agenda inside. Okay. So at this time, it's my pleasure to call this meeting to order. The meeting of the Equity Advisory Committee of the Met Council for Tuesday, May 17, 2022. So the first order of business is approval of the agenda, which I believe was emailed to you a while back, and again, it's on your folder. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion to approve the agenda? No? Seeing no discussion, then all in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Just moving on to the approval of the minutes. So our next order of business is approval of the minutes from the April 19, 2022 meeting. Which again, I believe were sent to you before via email. And may I have a motion to approve the minutes from April 2022? So moved by Councilmember Lee. A second. Do we have a second?
Take a second.
Councilmember Sterner?
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Are we, I know that you just approved the agenda, are we planning on making a motion or sharing the possibility of moving the AREJ presentation and then the equity and IRU policy updates to the next month's agenda as we discussed yesterday?
This is why we have staff. Because I was gonna screw up sooner or later. It was sooner than I thought. Okay. So, yes, thank you. And just in reference to the agenda is that we had several presentations scheduled for today, but we also have the regional administrator and deputy regional administrator that are going to be speaking to us and submitting important information for our discussion. So we want to make sure that that conversation is as full as possible. So the other two items on the agenda, the AREJ and the Equity Implementation Unit updates, those may be pushed back for the next meeting. So that will be a modification of the agenda. And do we need a motion for that?
Yes.
I'll move to remove 1 and 2 from the agenda and move them to the next one.
Okay.
Correction, number 2 and 3.
I'm sorry, 2 and 3.
Second.
And second by Councilmember Lee. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Lila. So we were on approval of the minutes from the April 19th meeting. And I don't know if we had a motion on that on the table?
I think we did.
Okay. Okay, so, no discussion, then all in favor of approving the minutes from April 2022? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Excellent. We also have space allowed for folks from the public, if they wish to address the EAC. Do we have anyone scheduled to address the EAC tonight? Okay, excellent. So, at this time then, let's just move on to the next item, which is the presentation on council engagement by the regional administrator, Mary Bogie, and the deputy regional administrator, George Gonzalez. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, and appreciate the invitation from the co-chairs to come and share with the committee. And I also really appreciate the introductions that each of you did as we went around the table. It really feels like in this return to in-person meetings, it's like reintroducing ourselves to each other, and we find that in our workplace as well. And the other thing that I will say that I really have noticed with our council and committee meetings is the engagement between and the conversation between and amongst the council members and committee members is just much more robust when we're in person and we can read our body language and we can feed off of each other's energy. So really appreciated hearing your introductions and just getting to know you just a little bit and kind of where you came from. I thought I'd start with a quick introduction of myself and our Deputy Regional Administrator, George, here. So as I said, my name is Mary Bogie, and I've been with the council since about 2003, since 2003. My background is primarily finance. I started with the State Department of Finance, which is now Minnesota Management and Budget. Spent about 18 years there in various finance positions, and then moved here to the council as the council's controller, and then progressed through in my career here. Each time here at the council that I've moved into a different position, I've pulled my old position along with me. This is the first position change where I got to bring in somebody else to do the work of my old position and not kind of carry it along with me. George's title is actually the Deputy Regional Minister and Chief Financial Officer, because of course I pulled the Chief Financial Officer in when I was the deputy, so he inherited that. Personally about me, I grew up in White Bear Lake. I have a very large family. I have 4 siblings who are older than me and 2 siblings who are younger than me. Grew up in a 2-bedroom house, so girls got one room, boys got the other room, and mom and dad were out on the porch. Nice neighborhood, but very small house that we grew up in, and gosh, my mom was a waitress and my dad a Montgomery Ward's serviceman, so didn't feel like we ever were in need of anything, just kind of were the same as my neighbors, and we grew up in a neighborhood where we ran around in our bare feet and played in the middle of the street. So much like some of you may have grown up, or maybe much different than how you may have grown up. For most of my adult life, I've lived in West St. Paul. What I've loved about West St. Paul is it is a very diverse neighborhood. My children went to school that looks like this room. And I always thought that was fantastic for them, because I think that some of the equity issues that we face are learned behaviors. And when I look at children interacting, I don't see those. And I think part of how we look at how we change is with our young people. And I'm really invested in that and how our young people can help teach us how to move forward. So I'm going to turn and let George introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. It was nice to be here. My name is George Gonzalez. So I've been with the council now 5 months, 2 weeks. Relocating to the Twin Cities area from Tampa, Florida. So I started here December 1st. So almost 6 months now, so it's good. So my husband and I decided we've been coming to the Twin Cities areas for many years, about 24 years or so. We have a lot of friends here in the area from my old job. I was Global Finance Director for the Coca-Cola company. I was there for 20 years. I implemented, there was a program that we put together way back, which was putting people first. We had a lot of LGBTQ+, a lot of females, a lot of African Americans, very highly qualified staff that was leaving the company at the time. You can Google it. It cost the company many millions of dollars. But I think a lot of us put our careers on the line at that time to really move the company forward, change the charter of the company. So a lot of us really, our careers were really, instead of hindering, it really increased at that time. I left that, went to work for United Technologies, and then I left that and started working in the public sector because I wanted to pay something back to the community, my education, and really just to move the organization forward. I'm known as a disruptor in the Coca-Cola world. What did that mean? It was a positive disruptor, not a negative, meaning I would go in and try to understand gaps and issues that we may be having all around the world. So I've been to 93 countries, which is great. But I ask a lot of questions, sit down and listen, and really try to understand, what are some of the gaps and how can we fix that? Just by communicating. I find that when you sit down and you really have a very difficult conversation, let's really peel back that onion and try to understand, what is it that there are the issues, the core issues, right? And then we address them head on, you kind of fix that. Actually, my husband found this job because he had a job offer here before I did. And then they didn't pan out for my other job. And then a few months later, this job became available. He was like, hey, you should look at this company, at this organization. So I did. Watched a lot of hours of videos, try to understand the organization. And then I applied, I went through the interview process and, Mary
He was
hired me.
stalking us.
And since I've been here, I really have listened to a lot of, discussion, ask a lot of questions, and just try to understand equity and inclusion is really important to me. Just from a personal point of view, I wanted to be valued for me, not because I was Cuban, not because I was gay, not because I was Latino, not because I was a guy, not because I was a veteran, any of that stuff. I wanted to really be valued for me, George, the whole George, not parts of George, but kind of like what you were saying, right? It's the whole me. What you see is what you get. I bring myself to work every single day. I bring myself to myself every single day and to everybody around me. And that's what I try to do, just really have an open mind and have an open discussion and have a very direct discussion. If, in situations like this, in committees like this, what I find is that not everything is agreeable. We're not gonna agree on everything, but we have to have a really respectful conversation, right? To say, here's what we can do and here's what we can't do. And that's what I try to bring to the table, right? Just that listening and try to reach an agreement together. Because at the end of the day, we're all here for the same thing, right? I've just heard every one of you, and we all have our own personal reasons, which may differ a little bit, but at the end of the day, we really want to be included. We want our voices heard, no matter where we are. And I've consistently done that in my career. So as I've moved up in the private world, as I have in the public world, I never forget where I come from. My family came here from Cuba in the 1980s. I was a little kid. We were the poorest of the poor. We worked in the fields in Homestead. I don't know if you've ever been to Homestead in Florida, but that's what we did. And we were taught, you have value no matter what you do. So I never, ever, ever forget where I come from. And no matter how my career hasn't, gone up or whatever, I consistently look back and try to bring people forward. I spent a lot of time in Tampa. I lived with Jonathan and I lived in Tampa for almost 18 years. So I got really involved in high school because I understood early on that explaining to the students early on in 10th and 11th grade the importance, and then connecting the parents with those students made a difference. And I'm a prime example of that. So I'm really looking forward to getting more involved, and Mary will touch a little bit more about how I'm gonna get a little bit more involved with this committee, because it's really important for me to do that.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I thought we'd start with a quick introduction of the structure of the council that kind of gives you a feel for what my role is, what George's role is. So let's start here at the top. So at the top, the council has a chair. Our chair is Charlie Zelli, and he is one of our council, which is 16 members plus the chair. And their focus is really on the policy direction for the council. Underneath the chair, you'll see myself as the regional administrator, and all of the people in blue there are our regional administration. And those are the support functions for our operating divisions. And you'll see our 4 operating divisions in the green and blue and red color there. So if the council and the chair are responsible for policy, my responsibility then is for operations of the council as well as implementing the council policy. And so when the council adopted Thrive, they passed that off to staff and said, here's your direction, here's your vision, make it so. And so that's the responsibility of the staff then to make that so. If you look at the blue sections, you'll see that they're the typical centralized functions that you would expect to see. There's finance, there's communications, human resources, our general counsel. So those are the things that support the operating divisions and their ability to deliver the services that we do to the region. So just kind of a quick, how does the lay of the land or the structure of the council work? Any questions about that? All right, I didn't want to spend a lot of time there. I just thought it might be helpful for you to see how we're laid out. All right, I want to talk a little bit about how advisory committees are formed. And you should know that the council has several or many advisory committees. We have land use and livable communities and investment review and the audit committee and the transportation advisory board and water supply and parks. All of those committees are established under the council by the council's bylaws, but also by Minnesota statute, which says that the council may establish these advisory committees and appoint the advisory committee chairs and the members. And it lists all of these things, what the committee's charge is, the membership, the council chair recommends that to the council, the representation, the composition of the members, the bylaws, it says that the council shall adopt the committee's bylaws. Removal, the members serve at the pleasure of the council. Talks about absences, talks about the conduct of meetings under Robert's Rules of Orders, and that if there's conflict between the council's bylaws and the committee's bylaws, it's the council bylaws that rule the roost there. And then it talks about members' expenses for our advisory committees, and I know there were some questions on that, and I will cover that shortly as well. So why would we engage an equity committee? the council was really wrapping up their Thrive 2040 plan, and this was really the first regional plan that explicitly addressed equitable outcomes within the regional plan. And there was a little controversy with that. There were some of our public engagement on that plan was not very friendly towards it. In fact, when I was presenting before the legislature, the council's budget, I was asked, where's Thrive in your budget? And because they wanted to erase it. And what I should have said is open the book and put your finger down, because Thrive is everywhere. Thrive isn't a budget line, Thrive is a way that we do business and trying to change the business for equitable outcomes. I didn't say quite that, but I came pretty close to saying, gosh, you know, it's all a part of our budget. So the council in Thrive described commitments and really defined equity as connecting residents to opportunities like stable housing, natural areas, public spaces, good jobs. It recognized that the opportunities and the challenges for growth and change really needed to be equitably shared both geographically and across cultural boundaries. Understood that we needed to engage our residents and our communities to be involved in public decision-making. And also that we really needed different approaches to assure that we had all that participation, full participation and benefit. In a perfect world, we wouldn't need an EAC, but we all know that we're not living in that perfect world. So in creating the EAC, the council was focused on outcomes. Specifically, they wanted to create more equitable outcomes for the people who live within the Twin Cities region. They were also focused on policy and processes for measuring our performance or our outcomes against those policies. But the council was also focused on engagement, and in fact, in establishing the idea of a work plan for the Equity Advisory Committee, the council said that the EAC should be action-oriented and focused on outcomes, focused on the council's commitment in Thrive MSP 2040, including the implementation of a public engagement plan. So in the first year of the Equity Advisory Committee, that was one of the major things on the work plan for the EAC. And I really wanted to point out kind of that difference between, again, the council and policy and management operations and the Equity Advisory team as kind of an offshoot of the council, again, focusing on policy and the processes for us measuring how we're performing against those policies. Are we getting the equitable outcomes out of those policies that they were intended as the council developed them? And that's really where we get a lot of bang for our buck out of developing an equity advisory team. I know that as you have been developing your work plans each year, you've both taken input from the committees of the council and the work that they plan on doing in the year, and you've added your own twist to those things as well. And I think that's absolutely the right way to approach the work that you're doing here at the council, again, with that focus on the policy side of those elements. Questions so far? Are we doing okay?
Mary, I have a quick question. How do you define policy? Dumbed down version, not like dictionary version, but when you say policy, what are you specifically talking about?
So what I'm specifically talking about is, it's probably easier for me to do the opposite. So think about managing the organization. And so it's kind of the what. I'm managing what we're doing versus the how. And the how is kind of the policy setting. So I'm setting the direction, the vision for how and the outcomes that I want to achieve out of our work. And on the management side, I'm really doing the what then of making that happen. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Thrive 2040. First of all, this might have been talked about before. Why is it called 2040? Are we looking at a 20-year outcome,
So,
a projection?
right, so the council has to develop a regional plan every 10 years. So right now, the council is starting work on the 2050 regional development plan. So I don't know if that'll be called Thrive 2050 or if they might come up with their own name for that, for the next plan.
Okay.
But they're 10-year plans. And so 2040 is the look that was developed back almost 10 years ago now to the direction of the outlook for the next 10 years. So right now, and this is really important too, and I'll let you get to your question as well, right now is a great time to be this group with the council because we are right now setting that policy direction in the development of the 2050 plan. So perfect time to really be a part of this group and to really bring in our community development division with Lisa Barajas and also Charles Carlson with the transportation policy plan. So all of the policy plans for housing, transportation policy and water supply, those plans that we do that are part of that regional planning, all of that is beginning this year.
So my follow-up question then on that is, how often are the outcomes changed and the goals? Because as years go by, communities change, people change, government changes. So how often are you looking at those different outcomes and making changes?
Absolutely, and I'm supposed to go through the chair, but I haven't been doing that, a little bit more informal here, but Mr. Chair and committee members. So that's a really good question because this council didn't write the Thrive 2040 and create the outcomes in there, they inherited that. And so one of the first things this council did when they came to the council and kind of through the governor's request as well, is they created their own strategic plan that kind of fit within Thrive, but kind of updated those outcomes that they were looking for and setting their vision for us to implement. And so while they didn't stray from Thrive necessarily and the principles and the outcomes of Thrive, they added their own thoughts to that as well as kind of updated what was working so far in Thrive and getting us to those outcomes. So they put their stamp on it, so to speak.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, let's keep going. So the next part of our presentation here, I'm hoping to address the recommendations that the group brought to the committee of the whole and presented. And so I'm following along with the presentation that went to the committee of the whole. So under those recommendations, they were grouped under different areas. And under this area was to expand the EAC's influence. And one of the recommendations from you all was a direct and simple pathway to guide council members' policy decisions and providing evidence that guidance is being used. So what I'm recommending in that area is to create a connection to the council's management committee. So I've talked to Chair Johnson, who is our council member that chairs the management committee, and she is very receptive to having that. You remember she was on this group for a while, and when she took on the chair of the management committee, she had to let something go, but she wants to keep that connection. And so in doing that, that's one of the ways that we are going to connect the deputy regional administrator to this group as well. So Deputy Regional Administrator Gonzalez will work with Director Cy Jordan And they will work with the EAC to really develop the cadence and the format of what that connection to the management community will be. And so in that way, it brings you to more access to council members. Now, I will say, you've got management committee members on the EAC as well, because Councilmember Pacheco, Councilmember Chiley, Councilmember Gonzalez are all members of the management committee as well as their other committees. But it also just opens you up to have a formal reporting place to the management committee. I think that will help with your direct and simple pathway to our council members and policy decisions.
Mary, if I can just to clarify where this is coming from, and just if you recall that back in February, was it, that we had the presentation before the council by the EAC, and the recommendations were the result of internal discussions here at the EAC about how to, in essence, make the EAC work better within the council. So just to clarify that, if you recall those discussions that we had in the past, and then the final presentation that was presented before the council. So these are just the recommendations that were made at that point, at that time. And then what the regional administrator is doing is just addressing the points that were raised by the EAC in that presentation.
So the second recommendation that we received was council member participation in serving on and attending the EAC meetings. And yes, we've had some turnover of council members, and we now have 4 council members appointed, each representing the operating committees. And so I think that we have addressed that concern. There was also a request to have the regional administrator, myself, staff the EAC, recommending that we continue to have the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity, continue to staff the EAC. I understand that we've had turnover in that staff as well. We've got some really great staff who have joined us here. They're sitting at the table with you, and they're in the room with you. And so I think that we have both addressed that need, and then adding the connection to the management committee with George being a little bit more connected to the committee as well. I think we've addressed the concerns that you might have had in the past with the support that you've received. Another grouping of recommendations was to provide the resources needed for the EAC to function well. And one of those was, again, to hire some staff for the EAC. Again, with new staff on board, I think that we can continue to staff with OEEO, and we'll continue to monitor that and see if we're now meeting your needs. But I think that with the changes that we've made, I think we can adequately support you. And this is very much the same way that we support all of our advisory committees with staff from the council. Another recommendation was to pay a per diem to EAC members. I wish we could do that, to be honest. We are covered by state statute that specifically says that the Met Council can establish and appoint members to advisory committees to assist with the Met Council performance of its duties. The advisory committees shall serve without compensation, but can be reimbursed. This is something that we're hoping to change. It's something each year that we bring forward to as a policy change. It hasn't made it where we want it to make it yet. It definitely will be controversial with the legislature, but it's one that we continue to put forward.
Excuse me one second. What's the change?
There is no change here. So right now we have a statute that says basically that committee members shall serve without compensation. not just this committee, but all of our advisory committees. Our hope is in a legislative policy session, and we've proposed this to the governor's office to get support for recommending that we may pay our committee members. So all the advisory committees are treated the same. I will say that this one probably has the most percentage-wise of community members as opposed to other governmental entities participating.
Also, I've also wondered about the disability reasonable accommodations. Should that be a part of the EAC resource, provide the resource needed for the EAC to function well also?
So reasonable accommodation is usually related to employees in the workplace. But I will say that our state laws have not been updated to reflect the technology we have today. And we've seen that through the pandemic, and had to work under emergency orders and things like that to allow us to meet in different ways. So I think that there will continue to be a push to update our state laws to be more reflective of the times that we live in today. And I don't think that necessarily comes just from the Met Council, but I think it comes from other cities and counties and governmental organizations as well.
Yeah, because certainly I kind of for example, when somebody is unhealthy or bedridden, actually when I was actually bedridden, I couldn't sit up and stay in front of a computer. And I needed a laptop. And I was bedridden for 3 months prior to my appointment to what was that, darling? The needle?
Oh, acupuncture.
Oh, yeah. No, my memory thing, words. And I couldn't stay and be seated in front of the computer. So I certainly needed a laptop to be able to be in front of a meeting. So a reasonable accommodation needed to be as much as I'm only a volunteer, but having a reasonable accommodation to be able to function well for the meeting needed to be taken care of. So having that in our recommendation might be for other, for the future, for other things also, might be, just as an example.
Yeah, I could potentially see that as a recommendation coming from the EAC for policy recommendations for the upcoming legislative session or something like that. That might be a way that the recommendation comes through the EAC to the council as a potential recommendation for policy asks.
Because that is a statute anyway, that.
And again, I believe the statute is related to employees and not necessarily to this situation, so that the ask may be more policy around how meetings are conducted.
Yeah,
like that.
I mean, I don't know how you.
Sadie, do you have something to?
I joined Director of Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity Chair,
and committee members. And so, yes, in general, the council policies apply to our members of committees as well. But what you're speaking about is public access as well. And so there is opportunity for us to review any direct needs and individual needs. So you just reach out to myself or to Lila or Nyambi and discuss what the need is, and we'll work through how we can help assist.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Just to clarify that, so a possible solution would be to loan that person a laptop computer from the Met Council?
We would review the need and
Okay.
discuss what we could reasonably do. And so it's not typically the first step is to assign council property to those who aren't employees, but we certainly have other options that we can take a look at and see how we can help support.
Thank you.
Chair, can I ask a quick
Yes, go
follow-up
ahead.
question? So you made a really awesome recommendation for the EAC to develop policy recommendations for the Met Council's legislative platform. I was curious about the timing of that. Should the subcommittees want to do that, because it's come up in our subcommittee? What is the timing that you would need for that lobbying effort?
Chair and committee members, I don't have that off the top of my head, so that's something that we'll bring back through SI. And I would say, absolutely, I think that's a place that makes sense for some recommendations around the fitting in with the mission of the council that we have, but I think that's.
I think the ADA probably would know.
I was gonna say, is it under ADA? Reasonable accommodations under ADA.
So for that specific area, our office works under the Title II. That's one of our responsibilities for access to programs and services. And so you would work through us for any recommendations as well as any actual needs. But in general, any policy recommendations that you want to be a part of supporting or presenting, typically that's around the fall time in August, where the council puts together a list that goes through our legislative representative that gets presented to the governor's office, and the governor selects which areas they will move forward.
That's
So
really helpful.
We get started on that process a little bit earlier than
Thank you so much.
So we'll get that back to you. All right, Mr. Chair, I need some help with this recommendation on membership composition and diverse representation, because I'm not quite sure from the presentation to the committee of the whole, what the issue is there. So within the council bylaws and the EIAC bylaws, it addresses composition, and it also addresses composition both by geographic and then diverse representation. So I'm not quite sure what the issue to address here, so I wasn't sure.
My understanding is that there were some comments made that the EAC's current composition doesn't really match what the bylaws require on the part of diverse groups, because there's very specific language on the bylaws. So, and we were having this discussion the other day. I don't think I was present when that issue was raised by an EAC member, but that's my understanding, that the comment was made that the current composition doesn't really matches what the bylaws suggest. Is that a fair, Lila or Sai? Is that a fair analysis?
I was gonna say that's my understanding as well. I also wasn't present when this comment was made, that I can remember at least. But we also discussed recruiting efforts and how screenings work, so.
And I can add that throughout the process, and you can add any additional experience, and I know Councilmember Lee, you served as well on the selection committee. So the EAC members, the co-chairs and EAC members are selected to be a part of the selection process. So we have a public application process. And then we have EAC representatives who serve on the panel and work with Katie, who supports all of our advisory committees throughout the organization. And you as EAC members actually make the selection and determination for your members that then gets presented to Chair Zelli, and Chair Zelli moves that forward to the council members for approval and vote if there are no questions. And so we can commit to being a part of and supporting a more robust recruitment process, and then working with you at the point of application if you don't feel you have enough diversity or representation in your candidates at that time as well. And so we'll be relying upon you to voice that at that time as well.
Well, and as I remember reading through the bylaws for the EAC prepping for this meeting, it is very prescriptive. It says one of this, one of that, you know, in the at-large. So one from each district, and then assuring that we have very specific. So we'll definitely take a look at that as we go through the recruitment process. That makes it a little bit difficult when we're replacing one or two people as opposed to seeing a whole group. But we'll make sure in the recruitment process that we're taking a look at that as well. All right, under providing the resources needed for the EAC to function well, one of the other recommendations was to train staff to facilitate discussion and listen for understanding to avoid defensiveness being talked at experience. And I will say that I think I'm hearing frustrations on both sides of that. I'm hearing some frustration from staff in saying, gosh, I'm trying to engage and I'm feeling shut down, and I'm definitely hearing from the EAC of that feeling of staff are really defensive and we don't need as much background as they think we need and to be able to make a recommendation. I want to be clear in my expectation that this committee needs to feel like a safe place for all of us, for us as staff and for you as committee members to feel like the things that you can say the things in here and be considerate and cooperative in our communication mutually, so that we're sure we're moving forward. And so the recommendations that I have up here in response to that is that we really need to develop some meeting norms for both staff and for committee members so that we have that considerate and cooperative communication that allows us all to move forward. We need to really develop that shared understanding of the council's mission, where our statutory authorities are, the committee's role in advising on policy development, and measuring equitable outcomes are the things that we are doing. Even though we're all working hard, if they're not resulting in equitable outcomes, something needs to change. I can't keep working harder doing the same stuff if I'm not actually getting equitable outcomes. We need to shift course and try something different. I also need to make a commitment to closing the loop and providing feedback back to this group on the items, ideas, and goals, and you know how we're taking that input and how we're building it into all the other engagement that we're doing with other groups into the decisions of how we're moving forward. That piece is going to require a little bit more formality in terms of how you deliver recommendations. Because if you're in your work groups and you're having communications, they don't necessarily make it back to George or I to make sure that we're following up and closing that loop. And so we might be looking at this group doing some more formal business items as a way to pass on recommendations so that I have a way to track those and we can actually bring those back through the management committee as well to make sure that we're closing that loop and following up and getting back to this group on how we're using all the input and all of the discussion and work that you're doing within the EAC. And so that's definitely something that I'm committed to doing is finding a way to close that loop. And so if this group can help me with kind of a more formal presentation of that. We'll make sure that we're tracking that and getting back to where we need to get back to on that. Remembering that this is one engagement and we do other engagement as well. So we'll try to close the loop and tell you all of the engagement that we received and how we're using that. So the next area was to develop an equity analysis to accompany all the proposals and recommendations brought before the council. Currently, we do have a Thrive Lens analysis that's reported on the business items, and that item includes equity. But I have to say, we can do a better job to assure that there's a focus on how we're impacting equity outcomes in business items. And so Thrive identifies 5 key outcome areas: stewardship, prosperity, equity, livability, and sustainability. In the Thrive Lens analysis that's on every business item, the presenters pick those areas to describe, and they most of the time pick the ones that kind of flip to the top easily for them. So if I'm doing something financial, stewardship's one that will always be on there, right? I think I need to flip them a little bit to say, I want equity in all of them. Because again, equity is how we do our work, and there should be an equity impact. So I need to help them do a better job of their Thrive Lens analysis, including that equity outcome. So a commitment for us to do that and work with our operating committees to make sure that we're making that effort. Okay, the next one here is the special housing allocation used for down payment assistance rather than a developer incentive. So here's an area where we don't have connection in this group with what our authority is. And in this particular case, the Livable Communities Act really guides what we can do with this program. And it says that I can use those funds for housing productions and the cost associated with that. And I can use it to give to applicants who are cities in the metro area and have enrolled in the program and per the requirements in the LCA. So I know that there was some robust discussion in here and probably in the work groups about a desire to use that differently, to use it for down payment assistance. And in fact, there was some work with the legislature to potentially change the Livable Communities Act to allow for funds to be used as down payment assistance. Lisa Barajas, our community development director, I think was before this group and actually was testifying in the legislature as well. We think this is a great idea, quite honestly, but it would require a legislative change. And I think, well, I know what Lisa recommended was that if legislation was passed to create this program and to allocate those funds that those funds then should go directly to entities that already do this work, that already provide down payment assistance, rather than having them come through the council to another entity, or rather than having them come to the council and the council create the infrastructure that's already in those other agencies to do this work. Questions? Thoughts? All right. Oh, did I go too far? There we go. This one is near and dear to my heart. This one says finance and conduct an independent external audit covering the last 5 years of the council's administrative application of federal and state provisions for procurement, affirmative action, and community or civil and human rights. The example given was an audit that the state actually did of application of those laws. And it was really focused on compliance. And the state audit really confirmed that the state agencies were engaging in considerable effort to meet the statutes, but they didn't necessarily result in equitable outcomes. So meeting the statute didn't necessarily get where they wanted to go. And that's kind of my example of continuing to do the things we always do, working really hard at them, but not moving the needle. So in fact, they said, gosh, goal setting requirements, getting there, doing it, but it didn't account for the distribution between those underserved businesses of Black-owned businesses versus women-owned businesses versus other businesses. It really showed that women-owned businesses were up here and some of the others were not. And so even though we might be close to our overall goal, there was inequity within the group. So what we have talked about is to focus on outcomes rather than a compliance audit. So the focus really is, are we spending our budget in our programs and services that align with our values and goals as they relate to equity? And so what we're proposing and have funded in the 22 budget is an equity assessment designed to review our direct spend to make sure that we're able to increase that spend in using those opportunities and identify where we have gaps that we need to close and how we might close those related to those small businesses, minority-owned and women-owned, and really understand our current policies and what can be done to update them to help us address those inequities in the review. So understand those current policies and how to refine them to strengthen and address those inequities, and then really understanding the barriers, including state and federal regulations, because there's some barriers there, and how we would support legislative change around those. I'm gonna let both Sai and George talk a little bit about this equity audit, and I see that we have some questions. You wanna address those first, or do you wanna address more details?
Councilmember Pacheco has a question.
Well, no, I mean, if we're gonna stay on this subject then?
Yes.
Okay. Then we'll go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So Chair and committee members. So what we've done earlier this year is we put $250,000 to really review our process. And what does that mean? Since my arrival here, I kept hearing, we're not being equitable as how we get folks to do business with us, right? So how do we do that? Really coming in, I started asking some questions like, what are some of the barriers that the small business, minority-owned business, women business, right, have with us? And we really don't, to be honest, we really don't know. Because unless you're a small business or you're a minority-owned business trying to do business with us, right, trying to engage us, we don't know what the process is because we're here. We see the inside, but we don't see from the outside. So we wanted to really take a look at that. And let me just help, we've had a lot of discussions surrounding this because we have a lot of work to do, but the reality of it is that if you look, if you get my analogy, so you gotta forgive me. So if I give you a hamburger, how do you eat a hamburger?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time, thank you. Because if you put the whole hamburger in your mouth, you're gonna choke, right? You really, literally, you can't eat it. So this is the approach that we're taking for here, right? Because we understand we have some gaps, but we need our business community to tell us, look, George, we're trying to do business with you guys, but boy, I tell you what, we have to fill out 34 forms, and then we have to wait 6 months, and then we have to fill out another 24 forms. I don't know if that's the case. Obviously, that's a crazy example, but and then understanding what it's needed for those forms. So I need to understand that from every angle. So the idea here, and Sai and I are working with purchasing to really, we met this morning, we honed it in so we can really get this going. Because if you get one thing done, we can measure that outcome, we can make some changes, then move on to the next. and then build that up. And that's really the approach that we need to take, not just on this, but on many, many things. That's how, honestly, I mean, if you think about, if you look at the leadership, not to take this away, but if you look at the leadership of this council, you have a white female and a Hispanic gay man, right? The two, other than the chair. The two running the operations are, you know, two individuals that really 25 years ago you probably wouldn't see, right? So we have made some progress, we just gotta do it the right way. So this is the approach for here. We're gonna start here and we're gonna then build on to that. But really have some really good findings, meaning if we're doing this right, okay, what are some of the gaps? What are some of the barriers that we can control? There's some things that we can control. So ultimately, that's what we're gonna do. We've been working on it for a while. We hope to get this on the street by June, which is not very long for now. And then get somebody to start coming in and working. We're gonna provide some very specific requirements of what we're looking for from an external set of eyes to come in here and kind of look at it. So instead of us doing the review, it's gonna be somebody else that's gonna really tell us, hey, this is what's going on. Yes, ma'am.
So is there any guide as to what issue gets picked up first, and then look at another? So is there like information that was collected from the businesses, and then you're looking at, is this the what for now, and then you move on to the next one? Or do you just get together and figure out, maybe we pick this issue that's really important and then move on to the next one? So I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yep, very good. Chairperson and committee members. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the very specific process of doing business with us, right? From small community, or from a small owner or minority owner business. What are some of the gaps that when you're gonna try to do business, so let's say you're trying to do business with us, and you reach out to our website and you're like, whew, I gotta fill out all those forms, and I'm trying to do business with you guys, because I can provide something, right, of service. But understanding that, those gaps that you're experiencing, or what are the difficulties that you're experiencing, it may be a language barrier, it may be the forms are too confusing, it may be something that we're asking that you may not necessarily have. So understanding that process, then we can come back together and say, all right, so here's what the findings is, here's what we're gonna do, we're gonna change it. And then, quite frankly, market our services to the community as well. So, because I don't have hard data, but I'm certain if I ask folks, they may not necessarily know who even we are, right? So I find that as a new member of the community, when I go out in the park or I ask even my friends, they're like, oh, where are you moving here? I work for the Met Council. Well, what is that? Right? So that's clue number one, that if people that don't even know us, then they may not necessarily know our processes.
The other thought on that as well too is there's a lot of opportunity here for business, but if you don't know what that opportunity is, you might not think I want to start a business in printing, because there's a lot of printing opportunity in local governments, or so a way for us to engage with the community to know the kinds of things we're looking for. And you may want to start a business then, or you may know somebody that has one.
We're gonna start with a couple questions. I just wanted to add on to that too. And so we have objectives at the council. So one of them being to increase our inclusive contracting and spend. And then the second one to eliminate the racial disparity gap, as it was already presented, is even as we implement our strategies and our practices, we continue to grow with white women-owned businesses, but we need to eliminate that gap with businesses owned by people of color. And then from there, we're taking a look narrowly at our own funding. So we have two programs. We have the federal spend around the disadvantaged business enterprise, and then we have our own internal Metropolitan Council underutilized business, which is where we have more control around our state and our state and local funds. With the DBE, we set goals for subcontracting. The contractors themselves select the businesses to work with. With our MCUB program, we have control of who we're spending with, and we select, even if we set goals, we select who we're contracting with. And so we're gonna start with a review in those areas based upon our objectives.
And there was a couple.
Well, first of all, I'm really glad to hear what I'm hearing here. And, when I said earlier, I come back and some things change, some things unfortunately haven't. And the numbers that we have are very low on purchasing and doing business with particularly the Latino community. And what I love about the Met Council is that it's a hybrid of both operations and policy. And making those two align and trying to get something done, especially at the scope that we are. If you're at the legislature, you're doing that policy, but you're not operating. And operating these things are difficult and broad. Yeah. But it just seems that we have so much resource and we do great research here. That we are so far behind on procurement and these numbers. Not just us, the state, the cities. I don't think the Department of Transportation is not meeting their goals. And I think that, there's just minimal things, rather than wait to the cure here, there's things we can do to treat it right now, like minimally putting our stuff out in other languages when we're purchasing. And I raised that question 30 years ago, and I look at it, I'm asking the same question, that we don't have the things in other languages. And I know this because I'm working with the Latino Chamber, and they're coming to me and saying, John, I can do the work, but I'm doing the work. I don't have a back of the house. I don't have the administration. When these PPP loans we did QuickBooks in Spanish immediately because they couldn't wait. I mean, and the legislature today is approving a lot of billions of dollars in operations, and we're going to be left out. These communities are. With folks like with this chamber, the ability to grab the numbers that you have, both on operation and on what you can do with it, ability to bring the people that you can bring together. Is great, and I think that we have an opportunity, but if I don't come back here another 30 years and say, after another 30 years, I'll be 100, but anyway.
Look forward to seeing you.
And no wrinkles.
So I just because from what I'm looking at right now is that according to the one report from the Secretary of State's office, there's just under 9,000 Latino businesses in Minnesota. Then I went back and now I asked state demographer, she says it's 1,800. And depending on how you count it. And I said, okay, well, let's say you will use either one of those numbers. And I asked Department of Administration, how many Latino businesses do you have registered and therefore certified and therefore able to get a contract with any state department, transportation, corrections, whoever. And they all the state go through the Department of Administration that's governing this. 88. They have 88 that is certified in the state to do the business here. For you guys, for, again, every other department, and Anita, you've been looking at these numbers for as long as I have, and so I just think that we have an opportunity today to use some of the resources, use some of the directions, and move that needle. And we can do some things just now, and even some of your surveys, if they're being turned down, why? And and there's again a lot more going on to this. It's a bigger thing, but I tell you that's one where if everything aligns, you can make a great impact in a short amount of time.
Well, and committee member, I don't want to make the impression that we're not making some progress. We've done some things in the last few years that have really upped our numbers a little bit. We are not where we want to be, but we have a Met Council underutilized business program that's kind of similar to the state's targeted business. That's different from our DBE program that's federally funded, but we've set aside what we call an MCUB direct, so we can direct buy from MCUBs when the amount is $25,000 or less. We've done an MCUB select program, which is really a sheltered market. So when we know we're going to have at least 3 small targeted group business or 3 veteran-owned business or combination, we can shelter it and say, gosh, this is just going to be for small business procurement. And then we have an MCUB preference program where we give a 6% evaluation boost to goods or service purchases between 25 and 175. So we are doing some things above and beyond what the requirements are to try to boost those numbers, and we are seeing some progress from some of those things that we're doing. I will say that the state systems and our systems, when they were put in 20-some years ago, and the state's a little newer than that, they didn't contemplate disaggregating data in the way that we're asking to disaggregate data now. So when you ask about how many vendors do you have in the vendor file, they have vendors that they probably don't have indication for the type of, they know the type of business and what things they have, but they don't know if it's a black-owned business or a woman-owned business or a black woman-owned business. Those are things that we've just recently been changing our system to build into our system to finally be able to disaggregate data and at least know where we're at. We were doing all those things by hand just 4 years ago? 2 years ago. We were still doing those things by hand, and it just kind of catching up our old systems to be able to have reliable data to know where we're at, to then know whether the processes that we're putting in place to meet our policies and for establishing equitable outcomes, if we're making progress, if those things that we're working really hard on are actually producing the equitable outcomes that we're looking for. Again, we're not there yet. I think we have better data.
So my question is, so the 250,000 for the equity assessment, how will the businesses be identified to even partake in the assessment, or how is that gonna happen?
So that's part of the review, right? So looking at what businesses they've done, and then we're still kind of trying to decide, to be honest, like how are we gonna reach out to customers? Or potentially one of the ideas that we had was anyone that has applied, right, that wasn't selected, reach out to them and kind of say, all right, what are some of the difficulties that you had? What are some of the challenges that you had? What would you do differently if you had control? That maybe there's some of the questions. We're still trying to work through that process. We're gonna allow the kind of whoever it is that we selected decide, how they approach, and then we provide the data for the businesses.
Chair, committee members, I think I hear two questions here. So that $250,000 is to hire the consultant who will conduct the assessment and who will do the review and come up with the recommendations and work with our organization. That is not the investment that we have in helping to support our objectives or initiatives. We have a lot of other objectives, and we have a lot of other funding. We have another $500,000 through our equity funds that we implemented last year and moved to this year that we're working towards our strategies and initiatives, and we have other investments that we're making too. So that's not the funding that we're dedicating, but out of this evaluation, we will take a look at what additional investments we need to make in a program.
Just a comment. I have a DBE, Outreach and Engagement. And when I apply to an RFP, which is a request for a proposal, and I do my proposal and I get the interview, my barrier is always the interview team. That's my last barrier. We can have a good discussion. I can go away from that interview feeling confident that I've checked all their boxes. And then when it comes time for selection, they've picked somebody else. And usually it's been, in my experience, a white female-owned group. And so I don't know how your process is, because I would say if it was up to the three of you, I think your numbers would be up. But if it's up to your department directors and staff and managers and supervisors who are doing that interviewing process, then I think those are the people you need to target to say, what are your barriers that you're not choosing?
Thank you. That is right on track. And one of the things that we're doing in our reporting is we're reporting by division as well. So we really want them to see their numbers, and I really need those people in the boxes, in the colorful boxes on their organization chart, to hold accountable their staff as well for seeing those numbers of their division and how their division is doing. So we're trying to put a little bit of pressure or competition by in the management committee presenting those reports, and showing where the divisions are doing. And so you're absolutely right, it can't be all of us in the room making the decision. We have to move those decisions down to where the business is being done. But we also have to give them the tools that they need to make sure it happens.
You have to change mindsets and environment.
My second question, so that the consultants that you're gonna use, how are they selected? Like, what criteria are you using to figure out who's even gonna do the assessment?
That's a great question. So we are going to, they're working with the proposal, the purchasing department is. We met today. Once we get that together, then I'm gonna review it and figure out. I'm really looking for somebody that, personally, at small business, that's what I'm looking for. Because they're gonna look at it from a different perspective than a large business. So I don't know, I'm still learning the process here, so forgive me. But I'm gonna be involved in this selection process as well as Cy, just to make sure that every T's dotted and every I's dotted. But to answer your question, historically, right, what I find in my career is that like people feel comfortable with like people.
Of course.
And what I try to do is break that mold, right? So I challenge people, right? When somebody gives me I don't know, whatever reason it may be, right? Oh, they have a tattoo and I don't like people with tattoos. Stop for a second. What are the qualifications? What do they bring to the table? The tattoo doesn't matter, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Right? Let's look at the qualifications of what they bring to the table. And then let's do that. Let's change. I challenge status quo. Trust me when I tell you that. You don't know me, so my thing is to earn your trust. It's just because I'm in this role, it doesn't mean that you're gonna trust me. I know that. I need to earn that. So I challenge status quo every single day. So when somebody doesn't select something for whatever it may be, right? A candidate, a company, an organization, whatever, I ask the questions. And I think Mary does as well, but you're right, we need to change minds, right? So it starts with us. And you have to plant the seed and water it. And we're a large organization, and it takes time. But I like to get things done, so.
One of the other barriers that we're working through with our divisions and with our project managers is, you know, they're working hard and they've got deadlines and things that are addressing them each day. So the easy thing to do is, I've got this contract that's coming due, I just take the RFP from last time. I change the dates on it and I put the thing through. And we're really challenging them to look up front at the beginning of the year about what's coming over the next year and a half, and start looking at those today. So maybe we can break that into two and make it more accessible then to a small business to be able to apply for. If I wait till the end here until my time is crunched, I don't have time to do that. And so we're really pushing to have information about what's coming so that Cy team can help them and have discussions with them about how might that procurement be done different this time than it was done in the past. And so we're trying to help them break down those barriers that are sitting before them, and one of them just being the time crunch that of course we're all under. And it's not because they're not working hard, it's because something else has priority and I need to make this a priority.
And we can continue this conversation as well as we move into next month when we talk about our anti-racist and economic justice trust indicators and outcomes, which align with our strategic action plan, et cetera, and some of those strategies as well. And I just, as a point of order, want to recognize time. As a community group, that you're 10 minutes out from your 8 o'clock time slot. I know, Mary Ann, you've had your hand up for a little bit, so I want to give you an opportunity to ask a question and turn it over to the chair.
Okay. Well, since you said that you have a short time to put this through, I have one question really that since we are working on our bylaws, and it says in our bylaws that we are, we're about to vote on it says, committee members serve at the pleasure of the council and may be removed by the council at any time. Now, is that absolute?
Unless the council were to change its bylaws.
That's gonna be put in our bylaws.
That's in the council's bylaws.
Is that in
So
the
the council bylaws say that the council may create an advisory committee, and also the council may remove members from an advisory committee.
Without just cause?
Because
You know,
I have them, so I'm gonna look back,
I'd
and I
hate to be
believe
removed
it's
without
for
just
any
cause.
reason. I can't imagine the council removing a member without cause, but I believe it says for any reason.
I'm volunteering for 4 years, you know.
So there's a summary language that is contained within the bylaws, in the council bylaws, and yes, it is currently in the EAC bylaws. And again, if there were to be any conflict with any changes proposed to the EAC bylaws, the council bylaws would overrule those. And so just like with any organization position, whether you're employed or otherwise serving as a volunteer, you can be removed.
I know.
But it wouldn't be just by happenstance that somebody could remove you. There needs to be a process and procedure outside of your bylaws, and there would need to be a justifiable reason why you would be removed, and that would be communicated. It wouldn't be something that happened immediately. And so we can further discuss that too as we put together what you want to do with next steps for bylaws, and whether that is a work group to review them or it's a really dedicated time as an EAC group to have a discussion.
I will say that I serve at the pleasure of the chair. You can remove me at any time.
We, as council members, we serve at the pleasure of either the chair or the governor. And for us as council members, it's the governor. We can be removed at any time.
This is why when I questioned this in January, by the way, that this sentence cannot be in here by itself. And yet, it is in here by itself. And, you know, I don't understand why, when even on the standing committee, I again questioned it. And so, you know, really nobody's listening to me. And so that's why I'm bringing it up.
If I may, I mean, that's a discussion that we had already, and we discussed that, how to create a specific process for removal, especially for people that, you know, absences and things like that. I mean, all of that needs to be reworked, and we already started that discussion with Cy, and I think with the general counsel. But at the end of the day, that provision that folks serve at the pleasure of the chair of the council, it will require the council to change its own bylaws in order to remove that. But on the other hand, we can have our own process to address other things, like make a recommendation to the council. But that's a separate conversation, and we're definitely engaged in that right now.
I beg to differ, because what I'm saying is that our bylaws should be, is in revision right now.
Yeah.
And therefore, as in revision, as a member, I would like it to state in a different way. That it shouldn't just state the way it is. And this is why in January, I requested also a committee to be formed for this bylaws. So that there are things that needs to be, when I read the bylaws in that January, I knew even that one sentence was I've already, you know, I said, you can't just have that one sentence there. And there should have been a committee formed, but, you know, however, but anyway, you know, again, I questioned that again, I think about 3 times, but it wasn't paid attention to. So I'm sorry if I'm taking up time. Thank you so much.
And Mary Ann, we can continue to have a discussion as well offline, so I'll connect with you.
Do you have more slides?
I have a couple of just quick ones.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and do it. And so we're choosing to start with procurement, but I've been doing an assessment, and I know that the state's looked at HR as well. So I just wanted to show kind of some of the things that we are doing in HR as well. So again, the state's audit confirmed that state agencies all have affirmative action programs and they comply with state statute. But again, the data was not disaggregated. And this is just one page from a workforce data dashboard that we've been developing internally to the council. We haven't rolled this out beyond that yet because we're just kind of getting used to the information as well. This is not affirmative action data, it's kind of a workforce data dashboard. Our equity teams within the council were asking for this kind of data constantly from our HR department, and again, they were doing some of this information manually and trying to pull things together, and so we worked with our IT department to develop a dashboard, and part of the thing that our equity teams wanted to know was some of this, how do we disaggregate the data, and both our council members as well as our equity teams wanted to know this, and so this dashboard, if you look across the bottom, has a number of different tabs. I picked this one that kind of breaks down by a deeper dive. You can go up a level and it's just kind of people of color versus non-people of color. And this slide is detailed down just a little bit more to show within people of color that the equity, the ethnicities are in detail there. And so we're working on making more access to that data, in particular internally right now as we continue to build it. It's not yet prime time, but I said, get something out there and let's build upon it. And so upon this, we'll continue to build in our affirmative action data, disaggregated in this way, and other dashboards as well that can help us put focus on it, put transparency to it, and therefore then help us know whether we're making progress. Also in the HR work plan for 2022, they're doing a pay equity study, and they've just gotten started on that study. In just their early start, it actually looks better than I thought it was going to look, and much better than what I've seen in other entities. So that makes me feel a little bit good, and I want them to dig a little bit deeper as well, just to make sure we're seeing anything abnormal in there, but they'll be completing that study over the summer. And then finally, we're doing a lot of just other initiatives that really connect to this work and contribute to engagement. We're doing some staff racial equity training. We've done an employee engagement survey, and we're using those results to really drive this training as well. Sai is going to come to the next meeting now to talk about the commitments that the council has made in the anti-racism and economic justice trust. And then we are doing small business forums where we're building that engagement and capacity for small businesses to be able to compete for the opportunities that we have here at the council. And that's where I'm going to wrap it up.
Mr. Webb, you had a question? You were raising your hand?
I'll hold on to it because I know that we're coming up with the anti-racism and economic justice trust, so I'll just hold on to it until that next training.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, any other questions for anybody else? No? Thank you very much, Mary and George. Excellent presentation. We appreciate it. This was a good conversation, and I know for sure that we will continue talking about these very important issues at future meetings. And if any members have any questions, or if you think about any of the issues presented here, and you need some follow-up, feel free to contact me or co-chair Goldstein Moses with your questions, and we'll make sure to direct those to staff for an answer. Well,